be the process that we could expect someday that we will go through in order to for people with different kinds of diseases to benefit? So let's just say that it's an example that through your work you identify 10 medications that are currently in generic form that now through the work that your organization and the people that you're working with have done has identified to take care of a whole number of different things. What can we expect to be the process that would lead patient X to first of all find that out and then be able to get a prescription for that so that then they can benefit from that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we actually go and work directly with physicians around the world to raise awareness about, let's say, arginine for sickle cell disease is something that we push all the way forward, and we do a definitive trial and prove that it works. We would work with doctors directly and say, consider using this drug, arginine for sickle cell disease. We would educate physicians, educate patients, make sure that it's part of guidelines for how do you treat sickle cell disease. Really think about it as though we're a drug company. We're a nonprofit organization, but we want to make sure that life-saving medications make it to patients and that no patient suffers when there's a cure on the pharmacy shelf. And so we'll work to proactively get the information out there, but also would love for any and every patient to go to our website at everycure.org. We're going to be providing all of this information in a central place within about 12 to 18 months. Any patient can come to our website at everycure.org and look for any disease that they could ever think of and get a rank ordered list of every FDA approved drug and how likely every drug is to be a treatment for your disease. So it's not just, okay, I have ALS. There are 3 approved drugs for ALS. So I go to my doctor. My doctor tells me about the 3 drugs that are approved. Well, they come to the EveryCure website. They see the 3 approved drugs. They're going to be at the top of the list. Then they're going to see a rank order list for the next 2,997 FDA approved drugs and the likelihood that any one of those might help. And now a lot of them are going to have zero point 0.0 scores because there's no data to suggest that a antifungal drug is going to be useful for ALS, right? But there are also going to be drugs that don't have a 0.00 where there's some evidence that suggests that it might be useful. And we'll use that as a call to action for researchers to say, hey, let's look at number 4 on the list. This could potentially be the right drug for a patient with ALS. Let's look at number 4, number 5, number 6. And so that's what we're working towards. And hopefully you as a patient will, information will get to you or your doctor. But if not, you can come to the website and learn. And, the thing that we're really fighting against is that the drug that saved my life, sirolimus, it had been around for decades. It was approved for kidney transplantation and for a rare lung disease, but it had never been used before for Castleman. So decades went by and people with my disease were dying from Castleman disease, despite the fact that this drug was on the pharmacy shelf for it wasn't for Castleman, it was on the pharmacy shelf for another condition, but no one had done the work to connect sirolimus to Castleman disease. We made the connection. I'm alive. Many other patients around the world are alive. Unfortunately, it doesn't help all patients with my disease, and that's why we continue to push forward our research. But we want to avoid that from ever happening for Castleman's, and we want to prevent that from happening for any other disease. We don't think any patient should suffer from a disease when there's a treatment that's sitting in the neighborhood pharmacy that the world just hasn't yet made the connections between.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And let me ask you a kind of a related question. Are you finding through your work that age makes a difference? In other words, you as a med student, in the prime of your health,
Mm-hmm.
you get sick, and then through the process of finding this one drug, you end up recovering and you're healthier
Yep.
than most people I know. Um, what if what about the people that they're 60, 65, 70? Are you seeing a causality correlation between the possibility of these drugs helping someone as a function of how old they are when they find out they're sick, or is it pretty much too early to tell?
It's a great question. So there's a lot of data to suggest that there are a lot of factors at play. So one factor to play is how old is the person in their in their lifetime. So how far along on the age span are they? Another is how far along in the disease span are they? So is it newly diagnosed? Has it not yet been diagnosed? Is it 10 years into the diagnosis? Regardless of how old you are, just how far are you in the span of the disease? There are other factors like, what's your diet like? There are other factors, do you smoke? Are you exercising? What's your gut microbiome look like? And sort of all of what's your genetic sequence, right? I mean, there's all these factors that come together that contribute to whether that drug is really going to make a difference for you. So our work and our task is to make sure that we find the drugs that are most likely to be helpful, because we can't change what your genetic sequence is. We can't change, what your lifestyle is, right? But what we can do is we can find the drugs most likely to help your disease, and then hopefully, you're at the right time in your lifespan, you're at the right time in your disease span, you're eating well, you're exercising, you're not smoking, and you've got the right genetic sequence, so that way you're most likely to benefit from this drug. But for us, it's about matching the drugs to the diseases that they're most likely to help.
And I like to add to that and see again. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the average person, when they look at the word cure, they think of, I took something, I went through a process, and now I'm done and I'm well. But that's not
Yeah,
necessarily the case, right? I mean, the way that I understand it, a cure, and I would love for you to expand on, in your case, are you healthy because you found this drug, you took it, and you were done, or are you healthy because now you have a drug you can take forever to keep you
forever.
healthy, right? So those are two entirely different things.
It's a great question, and the true definition of cure is that you never have to take the medicine again. A true cure, you took something, it fixed your problem, and it's like you were cured with an antibiotic, right? You had this infection, it wouldn't go away, took an antibiotic, and you never take the antibiotic again, but it never comes back because you've cured yourself of it. Um, what I don't set that as the goal for most diseases, because, as you know, for most diseases there are no examples where a drug has been able to turn something around and then you don't have to take it anymore and the disease stays away. What I shoot for is what I like to call a functional cure, which means that you are fully functional, your disease is completely in remission, but you continue to take the medication, or you take it at some frequency. Maybe it's every day, maybe it's every month, maybe it's every year, but you likely still have to continue to make the medication, because the reason that you're functionally cured, the reason your functioning is back, is because the medication is doing something that's getting your functioning back. So, for example, for me, I take that immunosuppressive drug, sirolimus. I take 3 pills every day. And I don't know if anyone's ever going to be able to stop me from taking those 3 pills, because this month marks 10 years that I've been in remission, and I feel great. I mean, I feel the way I did before I ever got sick. So I can promise you I'm going to want to keep taking those 3 pills for as long as I'm able to. I also get an infusion once every couple of months, and I'm probably going to keep taking that infusion every couple of months, for as long as I'm feeling well. And so, some people will say, hey, I want a cure where I can be off these medications. For me, I just want to be functionally cured, where I can live a full life, I can have full functioning, even if it means that I take 3 pills a day.
I'm glad that you clarified that, because I think a lot of people mix those two together, and at the end of the day, the goal is, like you said, is to be functioning in a healthy
Yeah.
way, right, and on an everyday basis. So one of the things that the reason why I ask about the age thing is because you see examples of people um, that are suffering from some sort of disease. Cancer is it's been on the rise. I mean, pretty much everything has been on the rise, which is kind of sad.
Yes. Yes.
But in the case of cancer, that is closer to me. Uh, you get into these situations where you see patients, they get diagnosed with a particular type of cancer, and then they go in through this protocol, and the protocol does keep them alive, does keep them from degrading, but they're not fully functional, in the sense
Yep.
that once a month they have setbacks, or every so often they don't feel well, you know. So it seems to me like, what you're trying to do is in many ways is to do better than that, because I know people
Yep.
like this. I know people that have been on cancer medication for 10 years. right?
Yep.
And they're alive, which obviously is a blessing. Obviously, thank you for everybody who did all the work to make that happen.
Yeah.
But they've never really been able to go back to the way things were before,
Yes.
right? And that's a big difference, especially today in the age of longevity and aging, and everybody's talking about all these
Yep.
different things. Uh, is the idea that through your work is going to be one way for us to get that to that goal of, you know, it's not just about staying alive, but to be functionally and happily alive?
Absolutely. I think that the goal for all of us that are in medical research, whatever disease we study, our absolute goal should be to return that person to the state of health they were in before the disease, and to have that person return to an outlook about their life that's the same as it was before their disease, that they can live a full, functional life. Again, before, as they did before their diagnosis, look to the future as though they did before their diagnosis. And so that's got to be the goal. And I think part of every cure, I mean, I will tell you that our primary focus early on is all of the diseases that don't have a single approved therapy. There are literally thousands of diseases that don't have a single treatment. And so that's where we want to focus first, or the ones where there's nothing. But I will tell you that we are certainly also interested in those diseases where there might be a treatment, but it's not good enough. And so you can imagine that if you get really good, and I think our artificial intelligence algorithms are already getting very good, really good at matching drugs to diseases that don't have any treatments, you can imagine that same algorithm can get very good at finding drugs that may be similar to the drugs that are already being used for that disease, but superior in X, Y, or Z reasons. So you can start not just finding drugs for diseases that don't have any treatments, but also finding better drugs for diseases that do have treatments, but they're just not good enough right now. And that's the kind of it's sometimes described as like a learning healthcare system, or a learning R&D system, where we want to continue to get better and better and not just be satisfied, okay, there's an approved drug. Because to your point, sometimes an approved drug, it extends life in some way, it does something positive, that's why I got an approval, but it's in many cases not enough. And so that's where I want us through every cure to make sure, and the reason we call it every cure is that we think that every FDA approved drug should be utilized for every disease possible. And we want every patient to benefit fully from the drugs that are within reach. And so if that means connecting another drug to the disease at hand, that's what we need to do.
So let's touch on that point a little bit more. There's the whole world of side effects, right? And
Yes.
and and I and I know personally people who have been diagnosed with, whatever, who won't go through that because the what's available to treat that disease comes with a whole list of side effects, right? In the
Yes.
work that you're doing, is that part of the equation as you're training these algorithms to actually look at the side effects and try to figure out why they're happening and hopefully get rid of them?
That's exactly right. And even if it's not to get rid of the side effects, it's to avoid that drug and to look for a drug that doesn't have as many side effects, right? And so there certainly are cases where you treat a side effect as, drug treats disease, causes side effect. You treat the side effect with another drug, and you sort of that you run into this like circular thing, right, where you're treating side effects, and now the treatments are causing even more side effects. But we really use side effect data to say, let's pick the drugs that have the least side effects. So that way we're not treating side effects, but really use that to prioritize. If two drugs look similar in terms of how likely they are to help a disease, which of those two is going to have a better side effect profile.
Excellent. Well, we are. I knew this was going to happen. I have like all kinds of more questions, but the time is running out. So, if you were to leave the audience with three thoughts on, because this is the podcast of three thoughts on, and today we're three thoughts on every cure, and I'm chasing the cure. So, what would you leave the audience with as far as three things that you want them to remember and to be curious about on the work that you're doing?
Sure. So I think the first one is how important it is to turn our hope into action. So for years, I had hoped that someone would find a treatment that could save my life. And then I realized that if I was going to hope for it, I needed to start taking action. So I built this organization. I started doing research. I got involved in doing things. I wasn't just sort of waiting and hoping. I was taking action the same way that you're doing things to improve your health. You're making lifestyle changes. Let's not just wait and hope and see what happens. Let's turn our hope in action. That's number one. The second one is that I had my last rites read to me when I was 25 years old. And of course, never thought that I would be here 13 years later. But what I learned in that process is the incredible power of feeling like I'm living in a sense of what I call overtime. So from the moment I've had my last rights read to me, I'm in time that I'm not supposed to have. It's extra time, not supposed to be here, and that can be scary. But it can actually also be very clarifying because it can help you to say, hey, look, this is extra time. I'm not supposed to be here, but I'm going to use this extra time to the best of my ability. I'm going to make every single second count. So I hope everyone listening will utilize this mentality of making every second count. And the third one is related to how this has been such a team effort. So my book is called Chasing My Cure, but we really should have called it Chasing Our Cures, plural, because it's been such a team effort. If it was me working on my own, we would have made like 1/1000th of a percentage of the progress. But it's because of this really impressive team effort that we've made progress. So, just to summarize, it's turn your hope into action. It's make the most of every second, and then it's rely and lean on the people that you can to lock your arms when you take on challenging project problems.
That is fantastic. No, I'm thank you for those words. I could not resonate anymore. I know you're doing great work. I was so happy um, when I heard your story. That's the same year that President Clinton was here, and I understand
That's right.
for some of the work that some of the stuff that I've seen online that he actually heard your talk too, and I connected with you as a result of that.
Yep.
And I hope nothing but good things come from that. David, thank you for your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It is truly good work, and I hope that we can share a meal here in Nona when you're here in a few
I love
weeks.
that. I'd love that. Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been so fun. I remember meeting you at the Lake Nona Impact Forum a couple years ago. I remember hanging out in the lobby at the Wave Hotel, and just really loving hearing about your story, your background, your family in medicine, and now it's really cool to reconnect with us.
Thank you so much, David. We'll be talking soon.